So to start with Mapbox, it's very similar to CartoDB. You'll basically have to make an online account, and once you make an account you can log in, and here you'll get this interface of the maps you're working with. And Mapbox is pretty similar in that it's a subscription service, so you can get a lot of services if you pay for them, but it includes a free plan which has some limits on the amount of views that your maps can take and the amount of data that you can store. Okay, so what I'll do first is create a new map, and here you can just specify the base file that you'll start to use, and I'll start with the streets view. So here you'll see the base map that it provides you, and this is very similar to CartoDB in that it'll provide you this basic Google type map, but Mapbox actually has a lot more options for changing the colors of this base map. So you have some options for color. You can bring in terrain into it. Let's just zoom into New York. So you have a lot of options in specifying your map. In the base sort of Mapbox interface, you can create some of these presets for the base maps. You can also start to customize how each element is displayed. So here I can turn on the landscape features. I can also create a different color for the water. Maybe I want like a more bluish tint. So it has a lot of control over this base map. And then you can also start to plot your own markers. So these are data points basically that you can plot manually, different sizes, different colors, different icons. So this is really what Mapbox at its base was made to do, is basically go in, style a map, and then create some markers to show something you want in your map. So in order to actually bring in a data set as a table, you have to use a standalone tool that Mapbox developed called TileMill. And TileMill you can access by going to the TileMill website, and here you'll be able to download that software. And TileMill basically is a standalone software. It's open source, so it's completely free to use, and it's made to give you an interface to create maps using not only base layers but also your own data in table format and also any other GIS format. You can bring those in, edit the maps, and then you can save them as a format that can actually be imported into Mapbox. So that's what we'll do now. So when you bring up TileMill, you'll have this interface which will let you create a new project. You have to specify a file name, so we're going to recreate the same kind of TripAdvisor attractions map that we made in CartoDB. We'll just call it NYC TripAdvisor attractions, and you specify an image format. Basically, you can leave these on the defaults. Okay, so once we add this, we can go to our new map. And by default, when you start TileMill, it will give you this basic underlay map. The editor is the main view where we'll be editing our map. Here you see the map view, and here you see that CSS formatting panel. So this is actually the same exact language that CartoDB uses. It's called Carto CSS, and it basically lets you style your maps in different ways. So the difference with TileMill is actually it doesn't include any of the Google type base files. You can see here if you zoom in, the streets don't appear, there's no names. This is actually just a shape file or a vector file of the whole world. So this kind of comes built in with TileMill, but it acts just like any basic GIS vector file. And down here in the interface you have some options for how to start editing your map. Here you have actually a reference to Carto CSS. So if you need any help with how to do this styling or how to create custom styles for your maps, you can reference this. This actually has a full documentation of that language. And down here you have a button which shows all your layers. So right now I have one layer loaded in. It's called countries, and these icons let you explore that data set. So you can go to the features, and here you'll see the features that are in that geography shapefile. And you can also show and hide it. So to make any changes visible in your map view, you actually have to save your project. So once I save this, you can see that that shapefile is hidden. I can bring it back. I can also zoom to the extents of the shapefile. So at this point, TileMill works in a pretty similar fashion to any GIS software in terms of viewing these layers. The main difference is that all styling has to be done in this Carto CSS interface, but once you get the hang of it, you can start to adjust these defaults and create your own styles. Okay, so the first thing we will do is we'll bring in our point data again to create that map of our TripAdvisor attractions. So to do that, we can click on Add Layer. We can browse and find our data. So I'll just browse to where my trip attractions data is. I'll click on that, click Done. It's going to automatically create an ID, so I can just save. And if I save this, it'll just bring in the data, but it won't automatically load it into the viewer, because to see in the viewer you have to give it a style. So here, if I go Save and Style, it'll actually give a default style to my data, and here you can see what that looks like. It will basically create this container for that data, and this is coordinated with the name or the ID name of my layer. And I'll give it a basic style that includes the width, base colors of the fill, and stroke. So you can see here it's the same exact data that we brought in before. It looks very similar, where some of the points were misclassified, some of the points ended up at 0, 0. So in TileMill, you actually can't get rid of any data points. You don't have the option of editing the data set. And what you'll have to do if you have these stray points is load them first into a GIS application, edit your data set, and then save out your data again. And I'll show you that next. So the ability to bring in some points data as a CSS is pretty similar to CartoDB, but you'll notice that you don't have as many kind of wizards to help you visualize the data as in that software. You basically have to do all of your editing through the Carto CSS language. The great thing about TileMill, though, is that it does allow you to import other kinds of data sets that CartoDB does not. And mainly it allows you to import other types of GIS data files, such as shape files and raster files. So what we're going to do next is actually bring our data into the open source GIS software QGIS. And we're going to work with some of these points. We're going to delete the stray points and do some other analysis, re-export the data as shape files and raster files, and then bring those into TileMill, which will allow us to compose them into a map, and then eventually export those map files back to Mapbox to create an online visualization.